Welcome to Manifested Publishers.
How are you, Anna? Welcome to our today's lesson. I'm your teacher, Conan Gakure. We are continuing with our learning on the establishment of colonial administration in Kenya, or colonial rule in Kenya. And in the previous lessons, we have been studying the response of the Kenyan people to the coming of the British occupation of Kenya, and we discovered that the people reacted in three ways. They either resisted, or they collaborated, or they had mixed reactions. So we had started with the first response, which is resistance. We have already covered one community that resisted against resisted the British occupation of the Kenyan territory, that is the Nandi. We were able to learn the causes of the Nandi resistance, how they resisted the British rule, and the reasons why they were able to put up a very long resistance. They resisted the British for a period of 10 years. That was a very long time resisting. Every now and then the British could send expeditions against them, but these expeditions could not be able to outmaneuver the Nandi. And we also studied the reasons why they were eventually defeated, the factors that contributed to them being defeated, and also finally we were able to learn about the reasons or the results or consequences of their resistance against the British. So that is the first community that resisted the colonial administration in Kenya. So today we are going to move further and look at the second resistance, that is the Agiriama resistance. The Agiriama resistance. That is the second group that we are going to study in our lesson today. In our lesson today, we are going to look at the cause of their resistance, how they resisted the British rule, and also learn about the reasons why they resisted the British rule. So the Agiriama resistance, this is the Agiriama community is part or is a community among the coastal Bantus. They are part of the Mijikenda. So they are found in the coastal part of the Kenyan territory. So if you could get your atlases and be able to locate on your map the map on the people of Kenya, you are going to locate the Agiriama people in the coastal part, in the southern part of the Kenyan nation. So this is part of the coastal Bantus, and they had settled in this place earlier, even before the coming of the British. So in their lives, they were farmers. They were traditionally farmers. They engaged in farming. So they had fertile land that they engaged in. So they could produce products that they sold to the coastal communities, the communities that were living along the coast. And with the coming of the Arabs, they could also sell them to the Arabs. Apart from that, they also engaged in trading. They engaged in long distance trade that had been established during the 19th century with the coming of the Arabs. So they were an essential part. They acted as middlemen. So they were a contact between the interior communities, that is the Akamba, who are also selling goods from the most interior parts of Kenya, and also the Arabs at the coast. So they were middlemen at that time. They could exchange their products for other products. So they could also sell them in exchange of currencies that had now developed. So they were trade was a very important part of their livelihood. But now, with the coming of the British established plantations. They came and established plantations at the coast. The British came, talking of the British, came and established plantation. They were planting cotton and rubber at the coast. So they established large plantations of cotton and rubber. And the only way they could be able to plant or be able to develop these plants was through the use of Agiriama, providing them with labor. So the resistance of the Agiriama started with them refusing to work in the British plantations. That is how the resistance started. The British, after they had come and were establishing the cotton and rubber farms, they conscripted or they forced the Agiriama people to work in the plantations. So the Agiriama decided to refuse. They resisted working. They resisted to provide their labor in the British plantation. So that is how the resistance of the Giriama started. So with that, the British opted to force them by imposing taxes. So they imposed a tax on the people to make sure, and the tax was supposed to be paid in cash. And the way they could get that cash is from working in the plantation. So when the British saw that when they are asking the Agiriama to work in their plantation, they have resisted, they resorted to imposing taxation on the Agiriama people so that they could be forced to work in the plantation so that they could be able to raise the cash required for the taxation. So with the taxation, the Agiriama also refused even to continue working. In turn, they opted to continue with their trading activities so that they can raise the cash to pay for the taxation. This angered the British because no matter what they are trying to do against the Giriama, they are continuing to resist and refuse to work in the plantations. So the Agiriama defied every manner of order that was given by the British. So that angered the British so much until one of the colonial leaders, who was known as Hobley, who was the provincial commissioner at the time, came to see or visited the area of the Agiriama because of how the Agiriama had resisted and refused totally to follow all the orders that they were given by their leaders. So when he came, the Agiriama tried to raise their grievances to the British provincial commissioner. But the PC at that time, as he was abbreviated, the PC, the provincial commissioner, refused to listen to their grievances. So the people resorted to totally refuse to cooperate with the British. They were led by two significant leaders. Remember, the people who were bringing the grievances of the people to the commissioner were these two leaders. One was a lady who was known as Mekatilili wa Menza. That was one of the leaders. And also there was one also known as Wanje wa Madorika. Wanje wa Madorika. So this one was a woman that was very influential in the community. So she led the community together with Wanje or Madorika to present the grievances of the Agiriama people to the provincial commissioner. But they decided, or the PC decided to refuse their grievances or to listen to their grievances, and told them they had to provide the labor in the plantations. So what did they do? Mekatili Wamenza, together with Wanje, together with the other leaders, rallied all the Giriama people away from those plantations. Some of them even moved further into inland, away from the plantations, trying to run away from the British. While others, they were rallied them to the Kaya. They rallied them to the Kaya. Remember, the Agiriama people were organized among Kayas. Those are clans or Kayas that are related families. So the Mekatili Wamenza, together with the other leaders, rallied all the people to the Kaya, which was known as Kaya Fungo. Was known as Kaya Fungo. This was a shrine that was believed by the Agiriama people. So these people moved, or the leaders marshaled all the people to this Kaya, where they could come and sit down so that they could chart the way forward. So when they came to the shrine, the people raised their, the different clans raised their grievances to these leaders, and they discovered that they have the same problems. They are being evicted from their lands to pave way for the plantations, and also they are being forced to work in those plantations. Another grievance that they were having, the tax had been imposed on them. So what that did at the Kaya Fungo, they decided to get oath. They decided to take oaths. An oath. They decided to take oath that bound them together. So they decided to take oaths that bound them together. They took allegiance. An oath is an allegiance. So if you take an oath, you have decided with the whole of your being that you are going to do a specific thing. So there are two kinds of oaths that were taken. One was referred to as mukushe. Kushe. So this was made by the men. This was for the men. And the other one was known as fusi. This was for the women. So when the people went to the Kaya Fungo, that is their shrine, that was very essential, and it had very strong religious impacts on them. So they made an oath of binding them together. So the men took the kushe oath, while the women took the fusi oath. These bound them together, and they vowed not to bow down or not to be intimidated by the British. So they decided to come together and revolt, totally revolt against the British. So they refused even to be paying the taxes. Remember, during this time, they were engaging in trade so that they could pay the taxation. So after the oath, they now totally refused. We are not going to pay even the taxes that you are telling us to pay, and they totally revolted against the British. So after the oath and the total resistance by the people, the British decided to capture these two leaders. So the leaders were captured. That is Mekatilili and Wanje. They were captured by the British, and they were leaders were captured and deported to Kisii. So you can imagine, from the coast, they were taken all the way to Kisii. Kisii is in western part of Kenya. So this was in an effort to scuttle the resistance. So the British tried by taking away the leaders, that is Mekatilili, who was a very strong lady that was bringing the people together, and Wanje. So they tried to take them away. By deporting them, they thought that they could now make sure that the resistance did not take place. But to their amazement is that the leaders who had been left, or the people, continued to resist and fight against the British. Even after they had been deported, the British commanded the community to move from their traditional kaya, that is Kaya Fungo, and move to another kaya. But the people refused. They refused to move, and now resorted to armed resistance against them. So, but the British now resorted to them using the scorched earth policy in an effort to weaken, or to bring the people to their knees. The scorched earth policy, so they could invade the communities. They could burn down the huts, the homesteads. Remember, as you learned in your Form 1 work, the Agiriama were living in homesteads. They could have one family having all their houses together. So the British could come and destroy those houses. They even burnt down the Fungo, the Kaya Fungo, which was a very essential shrine in the lives of the Agiriama. So these further fueled, instead of demoralizing the people, it further fueled them to resist against the British. But now, with that, the British had superior weapons. So though they were fighting, though the Agiriama people were trying to resist and fight against the British, they were eventually subdued because of the reinforcements that the British got, because of the strength of the weapons that the British got together with the scorched earth policy. Because when the homesteads were being burnt, the people did not have a place where they could live. So they were eventually defeated, and their resistance was brought to an end. But even as it was brought to an end, there was an agreement that was made. The taxation that has been put on them was lifted, or was relaxed, even after they had fought against the British. So in a nutshell, that is how the Agiriama resisted the British colonial rule. That is how the Agiriama resisted the British colonial rule. So that is how the Agiriama fought or resisted the colonial rule. I've mentioned they started as a resistance, just refusing to provide their labor. And then further on, it went to armed resistance, led by Mekatilili Wamenza, together with this was a very essential woman in the resistance, together with Wanje wa Madorika, right? So even during traditional societies, something that I just need to mention here is that women were also essential in fighting for the independence, or fighting for the independence of the African communities, and especially Kenya. We see one person who is a woman fighting against the British. So women also have had their positions to lead. They have had an influence in the society. So that is it. So women also have their position even in our modern society. So they need to be accorded the same respect just as the men, because you can imagine this is a woman that has stood and leading the whole community to fight against the British involvement in their activities. So as we end our lesson today, we have been looking at the cause of the Agiriama resistance, how their resistance took place and how it continued. So we said eventually here they were defeated because of the strong weapons that the British had. So as we end our lesson today, here is a revision question. Revision questions, and the questions are: number 1, identify the leaders that led the Agiriama resistance. That is number 1. And then number 2, describe the Agiriama resistance. The first question, identify the leaders that led the Agiriama resistance. That is 1. And then number 2, describe the Agiriama resistance. Describe the Agiriama resistance. And that marks the end of our history and government lesson for today. Until our next lesson, bye-bye.